Recording in progress. Thank you, Wei Chen. Thank you, everybody, for attending today's coffee chat. I'll start sharing my screen now. So I think today we'll just have a casual chat. I'll share a little bit about my journey. This was something that I've been very proud of I guess, receiving. I mean, it's an acknowledgement. But before all of this that you see on the screen, my journey, my entrepreneurial journey started a little bit more like this. So I was born in Indonesia, and I've worked in the intersection for many years between government, technology, science, and sometimes it's healthcare or agriculture. So I spent time in Turkey. I spent about close to 6 years in the UK, and then I was reassigned. So in my line of work, I guess in the last 10 years, it's always been building businesses within companies. So it's almost like an intrapreneur setup. And my last 4 years have been in Singapore and in Hong Kong, where I was working for a large PR company. It's an Omnicom group. It's a listed company in the US. And I was setting up one of their business units in Hong Kong, look after Asia Pacific. And, I'm glad to work with a lot of amazing people, and we've been awarded many awards by, a lot of associations and industry, I guess, recognitions. But one thing that actually got me to start my journey within agriculture and then looking into why I came back to Indonesia. So there was an event called the Shared Value Forum in Hong Kong, and that was the time where it kind of clicked in my head about how private sector can work with communities and societies to have the shared value. The companies usually have an expertise that made the business big, but then at the same time, the society where the company operates usually have challenges as well. So by working together, there's a shared value where the community can share societal values, they can have closer social capital, but then at the same time, the company offers a value to the community by sharing their expertise. And then one day I walked into a meeting where it's a little bit like this. Somebody who's Hong Kong born on the Indonesian side of the table. It's a meeting at the Hong Kong Trade and Development Council. And there I was, the Indonesian, sitting on Hong Kong side of the table. So that got me thinking at the time. I thought, why am I on this side of the table? And why is this Hong Kong person on the Indonesian side of the table? I mean, we remain friends until now. So that was the start of my thinking about, coming back to Indonesia, because after, a decade outside of the country, I saw many things which I thought could be useful for Indonesia, for agriculture, for the economy, for the SME landscape, and particularly, of course, for the technology here. There's so much opportunity. So I decided, okay, I'm going to go back to Indonesia and I'm going to work in the agri and technology sector. So I traded this for something that looks like this. And this is me in the middle of a peatland area. So I was in the middle of a jungle. We had to cross in these small wooden boats. And then, of course, after that, wind on my face, and 10 minutes later, being the city girl, I took a wrong step and ended up in a swamp. Basically, it was like half of my body was in this peatland. It was very soft piece of soil. And of course, the villagers were laughing at me at the time. But why did I do that? Well, actually, I was interested in looking at the supply chain of food and agriculture, especially in rural settings. This was me in one of the chili plantations in, I think this one was South Sumatra, which is not very far. And around these peatlands were actually a lot of the palm oil plantations. But outside of the palm oil plantations, you also find these smallholder farmers making a living out of different commodities. And the picture on the right was a rice miller, sort of like a small sized, on the cusp of going into a medium sized, and they were getting some contracts from larger buyers. And one of their challenges was, of course, keeping up with the cash flow demands and also modernizing the way they operate. So then in the last 2 years at ASYX, what we've done, what I've done with the team was look into a very fragmented supply chain. Rice was where we started. It was a huge commodity. It's a staple for the country. People eat a lot of rice. So we started looking at the supply chain here and figured that, actually, supply chain finance is not very known in this market, whereas actually supply chain finance has been used in other markets as a tool for smaller businesses, medium-sized businesses to be able to grow. And then on top of that, supply chain finance have also gone digital in other markets, whereas here in Indonesia, it's so fragmented. And different nodes of this supply chain actually have their own either manual ways of doing things, or if they've gone digital, they probably have an internal ERP system, but not connected to either their suppliers or their buyers. So we created this map and started discussing this with the different nodes in the supply chain, and found out that actually a lot of the agri value chains in the country are just as fragmented. And when it's fragmented, you can't measure it. And you can't measure it, then you can't really finance it. And if you can't finance it, then how are we supposed to grow it faster and at scale? So that's kind of how the journey after I returned to Indonesia kind of took shape in the company. And ASYX is a supply chain finance and collaboration company. We use a lot of technologies. We work with these large companies and large banks. But at the same time, the bigger proportion of Indonesian economy are SMEs, and they're not getting the benefit of supply chain finance in full. So when we looked into it deeper, this is what I found. I often walk into a room, and around the table will be a lot of men making decisions. And then there will be me. So this was from a meeting with one of the state ministers. So that's the minister there. And then I realized that actually women with voices, women in agriculture value chains are not being represented as well. So, I mean, today we're speaking here in WOMAG. My message is please make your voices heard, because I don't want to be alone here. The only other lady around this meeting forum was this lady who operates the PowerPoint screen, and she's not saying anything, not contributing her thoughts either. So then for me, sometimes it's a challenge of, voicing being a woman, B, talking about technology, and then C, in agriculture. There's almost, there's this perception where women are only supporting roles in agriculture, whereas actually these supporting roles are quite important. Like the planters for rice, for example, a lot of them are women. And then coming back to the supply chain story, what we've done with rice, which we now also implement into pineapple, for example, is we would see one large buyer, usually a sort of like a more established company. They would have multiple suppliers, and then we will have some companies like enterprises in the middle, which are typically small or medium-sized. They've started their machinery in the processing. They've probably took a loan from a bank, and then as the orders grow, they are more I guess, in the middle in terms of their cash management, because here from this relationship, they will be paid under a term of payment. Whereas here, for them and their relationship with the farmers, they typically have to pay cash within 1 day or 2 days. So there's been a cash crunch that we find that these millers or these processors in the middle, whether it's rice, whether it's another commodity, they are the ones that has to balance both the terms of payment here, which ranges between 30, 60, 90 days, and the cash needs to pay the farmers in cash within 1 or 2 days. And the visibility of these transactions are almost difficult to obtain because a lot of the transactions are being driven manually. So we did an exercise, I think in 2019, where we onboard 3 of these nodes: the farmers, the processor, and the buyer, so they can use technologies in their operations. And what happens then, with that visibility, funders can come in. On this relationship, supply chain finance providers started looking into the volume of the transaction. They started looking at the buyer as the anchor client. And then because this is well financed, the farmers then get finance from another local bank. So this unlocks the opportunity for the farmers to then get small loans, farming loans, or farming insurance because there's security, because of there's this buyer, there's the visibility there, and the financing can also be traceable. And a lot of things that we found in agriculture is that we tend to be focused on one commodity. So with rice, for example, we look at the harvest and then we look at the end result, the meals that we have. But in the process, there are actually byproducts that has not entered into a more formalized form of transactions, and therefore they're seen as being waste or they're byproducts with low value. Whereas actually, if we look at the whole product, the industry makeup, is that here we're only focused on these red ones, whereas actually a lot of the other byproducts are being used in other industries, paper, chemicals, electronics, glass industries, building materials. And imagine what we can do once we have that visibility with the technology, with proper financing, and all of this can then be optimized in a proper financing, proper rates, proper, growth potential. And then we started with the model that we built within the rice value chain. What we started looking into is another line, which is the circular value chain to do with garment and textile and the environmental impact of that. Because recently what we have seen are more and more consumers being quite conscious about the sustainability of the supply chains, or where their goods come from, where their clothes come from, where our food comes from. So we looked into the garment and textile value chain, and we saw that even 12% of the environmental impact comes from the early stages of fiber production, before it gets into processed into yarns, textile, and we consume it. The end of life, we throw it away, or we reuse and recycle. So then we started looking into this bit here, because this is where agriculture plays a part in terms of producing some of the raw material in the clothing and textile that we use, whether it's our clothes, whether it's our home upholsteries, or even in automobile industries. So what we've done was we look into one particular agriculture product. We looked into pineapple because Indonesia is one of the larger pineapple producers in the world. One of the companies in Indonesia also have like 20% of the global bromelain market around the world. So we looked at pineapple and thought, there's got to be something else other than the fruit. So we started mapping what happens to a pineapple plant. So when you have the harvest, the fruit, of course, goes into food and beverage and sometimes into enzymes. But then the leaves around the farm areas gets thrown out because people will use that as compost. But piles of these leaves would then attract a lot of mice. So then it becomes a problem. And then we started looking into, okay, what happens next to these leaves? And some of them get used as livestock feed. But then we found that even in Indonesia, Philippines and Vietnam, and sometimes Thailand even, the leaves are being extracted. Some of the fibers are being extracted using a machine. So we worked with an agriculture machinery producer in Indonesia and asked them, hey, can you help us in doing this R&D? Because we're trying to map the value chain of these pineapples and see if we can support the SMEs, manually processing these natural fibers. So then we extract these fibers working with a village-based enterprise. And what they've done was extract the fiber. And then with these fibers, the ladies around in the village would start turning them into threads, but they're doing it manually. And then they're weaving them into these sheets of fabric. We looked at it from sort of like an industrial view, a supply chain perspective. And we thought, okay, if this can be produced, I'm sure there's a bigger buyer who buys in bigger bulk, but the crunch will be in the technology and in the cash flow. So then we worked with, we searched around, we looked around, and there are companies that are developing vegan leather, they're developing mixed fibers, so pineapple with something else. And even in Singapore, they're developing the products into linen, into denim, and sometimes even automobile parts. So then from these pineapple fibers, they are then turned into craft products, fashion, and raw materials, become apparels and accessories. So now that we have this map, we look at the process and how much money is required to move from this number 1 all the way to number 4. So from number 1, the farmers usually throw them away instead of having value. But the moment we turn them into fiber, then what was waste in number 1 becomes, something with economic value that the farmers can sell and add to their income. With number 2, by decorticating it at scale and also involving the local community, more people get earnings because they now have the jobs of combing these threads, doing the QC, processing them, and packaging them. So there's also an economic opportunity that came out of processing this waste. And then it becomes this number 3 product, which is a cleaned and dried pineapple fibers. And this is the one that gets sold into the yarn factories to then be blended and treated with other types of fibers as well. So now we've started unlocking different points of financing opportunities, whether here in the purchase of these leaves or in the trade of these processed fibers to a larger entity, which has more visibility. And what happens here, this is sharing what we've done. Initially, the processing unit was about the size of this hut. So you see the leaves here on a daily basis. Previously, it was on and off, so they never have like a steady production schedule. They were doing things manually because some people would just buy it for R&D purposes, or sometimes students will buy them just to do some research or university projects with them. So we came to them and we worked with them saying, if we were to support you, you need to go digital, because then we can both understand the patterns of production, and then we can increase your production level steadily. And then secondly, what we asked them to do is also look into their cost structures so that they can decide actually how much do things cost and how much is the market rate for pineapple fiber. And then sometimes when we think about capital, we don't only think about financial capital. So with the company that created these decortication machines in Indonesia, we asked their help to send their floor manager to come to the site and see whether the workflow is already optimal. So in the past, what they would do is they would receive the leaves here and then process it, and then sort of like washing it here and then drying it here, and everything is just happening all over the place. So we asked them to do a new layout. So then the factory floor manager recommended that there is this new layout where from the parking, receiving, sorting, processing, and then drying, washing, water facility here, and then there's a storage space. So when it rains, the water quality will not change. So when we did this in the last couple of months, what was previously only 10 kilograms, on and off, now this small facility here with the right technology, with the right financing, is now producing at a steady rate of 200 kilograms a month and exporting them to Singapore. And they're also aiming to hit 600 kgs a month over the next few months. Now, the role of women in all of this, of course, is in the sorting, the QC, and they're the ones actually working together in the village. So as you go into the village, in the future, if you have the time or the opportunity to visit, I would really invite you to come and have a look. So previously, only the men does the decortication, extracting the fibers, and then they would sell it, send it via mail, cargo. But now everybody in the village is involved in this. The farmer now gets an additional income by selling these leaves, what was previously, thrown away as waste. Now they get extra income. On a weekly basis, usually the intake is between 500 to 600 kilograms of fresh leaves, and then it gets decorticated, where these leaves have higher value. And in the process, these ladies here also earn an income for doing the work. And this is what it looks like. It looks like, a crumpled hair. But the moment you've kind of combed it well, it becomes really soft as silk. So what we do at ASYX actually, while we identify the supply chains, we identify the value chains, we identify the types of capital that's required, and we work on that based on the data that we obtain initially manually, and then we onboard them into a technology platform, which we have. And then we start looking into the supply chain and working capital needs. And what we've learned from the rice and pineapple case is that different supply chains require different supply chain needs. The margins are different, the volumes are different, the terms of payments are different. So why should all supply chains be treated the same? And with technology, we can actually use a lot of customizations. We can also implement different models efficiently instead of having to do it manually. So then in the end, we would have smarter, more efficient, and faster way of deploying supply chain financing to even smaller entities. And if the farmers can use it, I don't see why other small businesses can't. So in essence, what we do is that we review the trade and financing relationships, whether it's Indonesia-based within the borders, or if it's an overseas buyer. We identify the gaps in the working capital, including the ones that are sub-investment grades, because sometimes they don't have the data, they don't know how to report it back, so we work closely with them. And then following that, we would design and deploy specialized technical or supply chain finance instruments. And what I mean here is that if the company then needs to mechanize, for example, they would need financing for that. So we embed that mechanization financing with the supply chain financing so that they can grow both in capacity and also in the cash capabilities. And then we would onboard them into our technologies and funder network. And then along the way, we assist them in deploying their new optimized modes of operation. So we use different technologies. So like this one, for example, is our supply chain collaboration, where they manage their dispatch advice, receive advice, and their invoices. So this creates visibility even for the financing institution. And then the financing institution can also set up different financing schemes, whether it's co-funding, whether it's multi-funders, and everything's done automatically because of technology. So in essence, actually what we do is that we're trying to integrate what was previously a fragmented supply chain, from the ordering process to the shipping, invoicing, disbursements, all the way to reporting at the end. Because at the moment, we have that capability, like in the industry-wide. The agriculture sector have also started implementing different types of digital technologies. Us as a financing and supply chain collaboration platform have the ability to integrate with these different parties, including the third-party logistics, including the existing banks or funder networks, and then including now that with API to API integration, we can also integrate with different entities, ERP systems, or accounting, or financial systems. So this actually helps, in our view, the small and medium-sized enterprises, and in this case, in the agriculture space, are the processors and also the farmer groups in moving faster and bigger, because otherwise we won't be able to achieve the size and scale. So as a business, the way we see it is that the global sustainable supply chain finance is worth $2.9 trillion by 2027. Our goal, even if it's a big, hairy, audacious goal, is to be a $1 billion company, and it is still a grain of rice, if you don't mind me putting it that way. So that's kind of the way we work. First of all, I guess to wrap this up, is that first of all, we map out the supply chains and value chains. There are so many things unlocked there just with a simple visibility. And then secondly, once we have the visibility, then we can finance it well. So if we're talking about unlocking smallholder financing, it'll be a lot easier when we can see the bigger picture and place these smallholders in the different pockets of the supply chain. And then digitization also helps, because if we have to customize things, with that customization, if it's done manually, it'll take a lot of time, but with technology, it makes a lot of things easier. And then last but not least, please, all women, voice yourselves, because around the table there are too many men, not enough women. Thank you, and if you have questions, we can have this coffee chat.
Right. Thank you, Lishia. Thank you. It's a short time for quite a lot of content, but very inspiring stories in many ways, and how you returned to Indonesia. And you started at the beginning talking about we all have a voice. I think for most of us on the call, it resonates very well. It's important for us to lean in, especially in an environment that is clearly an imbalance in terms of gender representation, because our voice has a quite a important consideration in terms of policy setting or some of the direction that when man is making decisions that may potentially impact us as well. And the success stories of ASYX, and thank you for that as well. And first rice, and then you have pineapple. And clearly through technology, your solution has successfully introduced that visibility and transparency to the ag value chain or the supply chain. Therefore, somehow the credit risks of smallholder farmers or most of the players can be better managed, and allowing financial institutions to step in to be able to finance the players as well. I like the story you talk about the farmers at the pineapple community, because the productivity has increased and poverty definitely has reduced as well. And the gender equality, somehow through all the work that you're doing, women has the ability to earn an income, which makes a huge difference from an equality standpoint. So thank you for that, a great story. We definitely hope to see ASYX continue to be able to scale out your solution, your technology, therefore benefiting a wider community, especially your women. So let's just check if there's any questions for Felicia, whether from the participants or...
Yeah, I know I was like rushing through like the whole presentation, but I guess, I mean, it's an interesting story to see the way women are being involved. At the beginning, we thought a lot of the men would be more interested in it, but it turns out that the women are more particular about quality. And so, you know, they're the ones doing the QC, and I mean, I guess we are more attentive to different things, and whether it's industry or the pineapple. And we have a couple more that we're preparing to launch in the next few months or so.
Wow. Okay. I see a couple of people raise their hand. First was Pranav and Aaron as well. Okay, Pranav, you want to go first? Your question?
Sure, Wei Chen, thank you so much. And Lishia, that was a fantastic presentation. Thank you. A lot of really, really critical information delivered concisely and effectively. Thank you for that. Actually, the question that I have is, a lot of the impacts that you've discussed are primarily focused on the increased rural incomes, which is fantastic. I was wondering if you've heard whether either formally through your M&E processes or whether it's anecdotal, if you've seen any knock-on effects as well, like increased empowerment of the women that are involved in the programs that you're implementing, or things like increased nutrition, or more kids going to school because the families now have more money to get them that education. Yeah, things like that.
Okay. Well, I have to say that a lot of the activities that we've done have only been very active in the past year, and the past year has been also challenging with COVID. that's the biggest challenge. But in terms of impact, what we can see from our pineapple, I think, because we've only done the pineapple in the last 6 months, and rice was a bit longer than that. It's been, I guess, a year for the rice project. For the knock-on effects, it's at the moment what we're observing, not yet in the women being able to send their kids to school, but the women now have enough funds to buy the data credits so their kids can continue getting their education. The second thing that we noticed when we started our pineapple activity, the village young people were in vocational schools, and they're in different part of vocational schools, some in agriculture, some in something else, some in forestry, I think. And this allows them to be involved in our operations, earning a living, well, at least subsidizing part of their living costs. And from that, it opens up their mind that agriculture is not just about planting and harvesting and stop there, but it's planting, harvesting, processing. And this is the one that adds value to the agriculture product. And that's what we've seen in terms of the knock-on. I'll get back to you in a year. You can ping me again and ask me if more children have gone to school and getting better nutrition. And on the note on nutrition, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, because this little cluster of our production hub, I guess, in this village, now have people earning more money. Some of the sort of like snack sellers, they started doing their rounds around this little village, so selling their corn, selling their different food and food stuff and snacks. So the ripple effect, I think it's slowly starting to show, where whenever we scale up in one location, people get the benefit locally. And it's not just the immediate workforce, but it's also the people around them that can then now sell different things. They do more trades around the area. So Pranav, I think, I hope that answers your question. That's as far as we've gone so far.
All right. Thank you, Lishia, and thank you, Pranav, for the questions as well. Aaron, you wanted to, ask your question? I think you're also raising your hand.
Yes, thanks so much, Wei Chen. And Lishia, thank you. As Pranav said, really excellent presentation. And there's a few people on the line who I was messaging just as you started, and I said, oh, you need to be here. This talk is fantastic. So I'm pointing at you people on the line. Definitely hope that you can connect with some of the folks who are listening here today. But I actually wanted to ask you, who are some of your existing collaborators that are helping you make this work possible? And names of NGOs would be curious to hear, but are you working with any other financial actors either in Indonesia or in the region that you might be able to share with us? Yeah. And I'm asking a little bit strategically again, because I know some of the folks on the line, and would just love to give them a chance to hear from you who you're already working with, but also who you'd like to be partnering with going forward.
Right. Oh, thank you, Aaron. Thanks for the shout out. I mean, we're very happy to have more people looking into this. So the collaborators for us in the past year, it's been a lonely journey. Whenever I tell anyone about pineapple leaves, they'd be like, "Why are you worried about the leaves? Enough fruit. You can sell the fruit." But we persevered, and our partner in Singapore that's helped us develop this is a company called NextEvo, because they also believe in natural fiber. So they work with coconuts, pineapple, and bamboo. So when we told them, hey, we're doing this pineapple, they were like, great, we'll help you. So they've been transferring some of the knowledge on how to make the product better. The other collaborator that we have, and recently we've also inked a partnership with the UN Capital Development Fund. What they see in what we do is that there is opportunity for SMEs to be able to adopt technologies without fear, without reservation. And at the back end of that, financial instruments can be developed. So the program is supported by the UN Capital Development Fund, Visa, UNESCAP, Australian Aid, and the Canadian government, I think. So they're helping us with shaping the financial instruments. And then to your question about who else will we work with, will be funder networks, will be banks, would be financial institutions, bank or non-bank, so that we can work with them in shaping what's possible. Because I believe that this can be translated into other value chains as well. I mean, we work with rice, huge scale. We work with pineapple, smaller scale, but we started seeing patterns that come out, terms of payment patterns, capacity patterns. So then with that, it would be great if we can all work together and then map out, different institutions will have different interests, whether it's upstream, downstream, different supply chains. So yeah, I mean, companies who work with agriculture in general, I think will be great to partner with us on this initiative.
Thank you.
And thank you for the questions, and thank you, Lishia, as well. I've just left your LinkedIn profile on the chat itself, and yeah, thank you everybody, and thank you for the interest and Aaron's questions as well. And I'm very sure Lishia will love to have that conversation with all of you on this chat and or your network as well. All right. Okay. Any other questions or comments, Alicia?
Oh, I think there's another one here. In terms of products, are we looking at pineapple leather, Pinatex? Yeah, Pinatex is one of the ones that inspired me. And other materials for woven fibers. Right now, what we see the strength of this landscape, at least in Indonesia or countries with huge agriculture operations, is somewhere in that first mile. So if we see Pinatex as the end product, then we would see the agriculture potential here is to supply to companies like Pinatex. And companies like Pinatex would need large volumes. So they would probably, I'm not saying this is Pinatex, but about that size of company with that size of product, that would need a steady supply, on a monthly or weekly basis, which require investments on the sort of like processing side, 3 or 4 times the machines that they have at the moment. And if this cannot be supported, then companies like Pinatex will then have to either find other raw materials, or they themselves set up their own divisions for that vertical integration. But if we can support these processors with the capacity, both machine and cash, then companies like Pinatex will then be able to source this from these agriculture centers. And these agriculture centers could benefit because the economy grows locally there, and then it also affects their community and all the way to the farmers, if that makes sense. So in terms of other materials for woven fibers, ASYX now works with the Fiber Council in Indonesia, and they've identified about 8 or 9, which also includes rami, kanaf, and some of these fibers are also additives for things like Kevlar. I never thought of that in the beginning. Like, what natural fibers and Kevlar? I only see Kevlar in like action movies. But then there are also like seaweed, for example, that's being developed into additional material for construction. So it's not just the woven materials, but also all the other things that are based on these agricultural byproducts. Even with rice, a Japanese company and an Indonesian researcher is looking into how they can create cardiac catheters using some of the cellulose from rice straws. So the opportunities are endless, but unless we start mapping them out and then we start seeing what's the financial capacity of these supply chains, then it'll be difficult for us to move forward together. I mean, not just on the more advanced one, but, and that's where the shared value thing came about.
Right, thank you, Lishia. I'd love to continue this conversation. Unfortunately, we're coming very close to the time of the coffee chat. So before we wrap out, I want to hand it over to Eva, who's going to talk to us about the WOMAC Keynote training program. Over to you, Eva.
Yeah, thank you. And Lishia, what a great presentation. Very inspired by that. So I just really want to do a quick shout out and a promotion and introduce you to our next Keynote program. We're very excited to have our 3rd one, hoping to launch that in October. So this program aims to improve participants' storytelling skills and their confidence in public speaking. So there's 6 sessions. This, unlike the other ones, will be a virtual event. There are limited seats available. So guys, if you're very interested, there's that scan icon. So please scan it and register now, and we'll let you know the next steps. Thank you.
Thank you, Eva. All right. Okay, we're about there. Okay, there is another event coming out for WOMAC for this particular month in September. Again, there's the QR code up there as well. September, on the 30th of September, we have a particular event that's very specifically focusing on food waste and talking about beer as well. So do join us, mark your calendar, and follow us on LinkedIn as well. I think that kind of brings us to the end of the coffee chat today, and thank you all very much for joining us, and thank you, Lishia, as well. A great story, and we definitely hope that conversation will continue. And last not least, before you go, we do have our usual WOMAC poll as well. So if we can have that as the next slide, then we welcome your feedback and suggestion. to make us better. So thank you all very much for joining us, and have a very good and safe day. Thank you.